Hello, and welcome to Off the Cuff. I am your host, Chris Martenson, and on this program, every week, we are going to bring you a fascinating guest, where we are going to discuss the economy, energy, or the environment, informally and without a script. Welcome, Mish. It's good to have you here on Off the Cuff again.
It's a pleasure to be back. I'm looking at some articles here on France. Who else? They're taxed to the point of no recovery. 57% of GDP is French spending.
What? 57%?
57%. And it's going to be the highest in the EU. There's one small country, I think, I forget which one, in Europe is a little bit higher, and France is destined to take the number one spot sometime in 2014. They are raising taxes like mad, and as I looked at stats on market yesterday for the PMI reports, even Spain was now, flirting with break even. Italy was flirting with break even. France dipped back to negative, and its unemployment rate is going up, its employment rate is dropping, and they wonder what's going wrong. Well, hey, so what are they going to do? They're going to go raise more taxes. Chris, how's that going to work?
Well, first of all, I'm shocked to discover that you're telling me that the EU economy is not just robustly recovering at this point in time, because it seems like half the headlines I read tell me that. And second of all, I guess I would say that if turns out that raising taxes has not worked, obviously the thing you have to do is you have to raise them harder. They must raise taxes until morale improves.
That seems to be the plan in France. Meanwhile, back in the good old US of a very significant but expected ruling, at least in my corner, although some people thought that pensions were sacrosanct, or I don't think they are, and that's what a judge ruled, nor do I think they should be. And, of course, all the union advocates think they should be. Mm-hmm. But the judge explicitly came out and said that in spite of Michigan's Constitution, which protects pension assets, that bankruptcy overrules the Michigan Constitution, and that the pensions could be caught in a bankruptcy hearing. He didn't say they would be. He said they could be. I certainly expect them to be now, and this might be the big shot. Now, we've seen these before. There was the same ruling in Vallejo, California, 3 years ago when Vallejo first went bankrupt. The federal judge actually said that Vallejo could do that, but what did Vallejo do? In spite of the judge saying they could, they didn't. So, but this one's going to be handled by the new city manager put in place by the government to restructure Detroit. I expect there to be a big battle over these haircuts, and I expect both the bondholders and the pensioners to take a big hit. And actually, that's the way it should be.
Well, that's going to be really traumatic, obviously, for a lot of people. And I was reading an article where there are a number of Detroit pensioners are already finding themselves with their payments suspended as this is all getting worked through the courts and resolved, and that they were being guided to expect somewhere around 16 cents on the dollar for their expectations. Now, for a lot of people who are living on their pensions, this is going to be a huge amount of hardship. And I just want to contrast that for a minute with the hardship that big banks were expected to shoulder as a consequence of their reckless actions. Now, I think a lot of pensioners, we could admit that maybe the pensions shouldn't have been structured as such as they were, and that with both parties on the same side of the bargaining table, meaning the unions and the government workers who were negotiating pensions, there's a lot to fault in that. But I'm thinking somebody who actually put their 30 years in or whatever they put in is probably on the low end of the totem pole of faultage here, compared to, say, a big bank that was recklessly lending and doing dumb things like Goldman Sachs taking the other side of big, giant derivative positions with AIG or something like that. They should have known better. And if they lost money, they should have taken the losses. Of course, Goldman Sachs was made whole to the tune of $13 billion thanks to Geithner, who is now working at a cushy job in the private sector thanks to handing taxpayer money to Goldman. So when we look at that, I'm noticing here that on my radar screen, I continue to see case after case after case where big banks are levied what to you and I would be an amazing fine, but nobody goes to jail. nobody's career is ruined, and nothing seems to happen, and the size of the fine, you always suspect it's probably a fraction of what they actually gained through the illegal activities that they undertook.
Oh, yeah, especially in Europe right now. We're seeing fines on the order of, and they're calling these things enormous fines. They're on the order of 1.3 billion. And if I read correctly, that's spread out amongst a number of banks. Even if it's one bank, good grief. 1.3 billion to the largest European banks is absolutely nothing at all in terms in relationship to what they gained on LIBOR and Euribor and all of these other big rigging scandals that these banks partook in. And in the U.S., J.P. Morgan was fined $13 billion, of which $4 billion had to go to lowering mortgage payments or something for people.
Mm-hmm.
But of that $13 billion fine, $7 billion of it is J.P. Morgan can use as a tax write-off. Now,
Yeah.
J.P. Morgan allocated $20 billion for this. They got hit with $13 billion. The way that it was structured or worded was $7 billion of that now becomes tax write-offs. So they allocated $20 billion for this, and they're going to get hit with $6 billion. And $6 billion is a lot of money, but how much damage did they do? Did Countrywide do? Did Bank of America do? Did Merrill Lynch? All of these places do, and we're talking about total fines. Actually, J.P. Morgan's amounts to almost all of the total fines. You add another billion here or there, and compare that to the damage done and the amount of money they made, and the backdoor funding to recapitalize these banks, because the Fed prints $2 trillion worth of money that banks don't want to lend and can't even use, but they park it at the Fed and get 0.25% a year for doing nothing. Work 0.25% out on $2 trillion, and it amounts to a stack of money year in and year out that go to these banks, the largest banks, all of which were the ones that caused these problems.
Now, this is really important. So, this LIBOR scandal, for people listening who are not familiar with it. So the London Interbank Overnight Rate, LIBOR, L-I-B-O-R, is used to set rates on literally trillions of dollars of financial products. It ranges from mortgages, derivatives, all kinds of things, right? And so even a tiny wiggle, a basis point being 1/100%, even a few basis points here or there actually has an enormous impact on this, all because of the leverage, right? We're wiggling a few basis points on trillions of dollars of outstanding obligations. And so the EU wades in. They slapped record fines of 1.7 billion euros, but this is 8 major banks specifically for manipulating lending rates, okay, that have a key role. And they said they did it for 2 reasons. One was just to make profits, right? They just did it because they took the other side of the trade, manipulated the rate, and then said, haha, I win. It's like playing with loaded dice. But the other was that they rigging the rates made the banks appear healthier than they were, because when the banks could report a lower LIBOR rate, it meant that other banks had higher trust in them. If banks had other higher trust, it signals to the market that maybe this bank is healthy. So it was really, it was used a couple of ways. So this guy, Joaquin Almunia, a European Commission Vice President in charge of competition policy, said, what is shocking about the LIBOR and Euribor scandals is not only the manipulation of benchmarks, which is being tackled by financial regulators worldwide, but also the collusion between banks who are supposed to be competing with each other. So the banks involved: Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland or RBS, JP Morgan, Barclays, Soc Gen or Societe Generale, UBS, and RP Martin. This is like, they're manipulating trillions of dollars of stuff. So wander with me for a moment over into the other markets that we look at, and I see daily shenanigans in currency markets, in precious metals markets, in equities markets, with the way options get valued and played out. I just have this general sense that the markets no longer reflect anything about investors, putting air quotes up here, but it reflects some kind of like game of elephants. I'm just like a mouse on the elephant field when they're all playing soccer. And then, I go over and I look at things like CNBC viewership's at an all-time low, and individual investors are not putting that much money in and playing the market nearly as much as they used to. Because it's that what the Fed has mostly done and the other central banks is they've created a market structure now where only the biggest players who have the deepest pockets, who are basically free, immune from criminal prosecution, are free to go out, rig, fraudulently play through the markets, whatever they can do. Their only rule is don't get caught. But if you do get caught, the secondary rule is we'll fine you a portion of what you actually earn from those fraudulent behaviors. So, of course, people are not really trusting of the markets.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no pricing mechanism at all. Let's go back to this LIBOR thing and explain to people how that works. LIBOR is actually a survey. It's supposed to be measuring. LIBOR is supposed to measure bank-to-bank lending rates. What would banks charge each other to lend money overnight? And as you mentioned, what they would charge is a function of the credit risk of the banks. So some of these banks, European banks, where there were, starting to be runs on these banks, they were saying that their LIBOR rate was low. And it's not actual, it doesn't measure an actual transaction. They merely call up the bank and say, what rate would you, require to, lend money overnight? And so, all these quotes were fraudulent, and worse yet, traders at these banks behind the derivatives desk would actually phone the people who actually gave the quote on what they would lend at or charge for overnight lending. The guys selling the derivatives, the quote desk would say, if you could just move the rate a little bit in this direction or this direction, it would help out my trade. And they did it. That's the most galling thing about all of this. And in spite of the fact that this went on, no one was prosecuted. No one was not only found guilty, no one was even criminally prosecuted for this, Chris.
And it was as galling as you just said, where there were emails in this day and age, emails where they said, if you can hit this number for me, I'll get you really awesome champagne and maybe this vacation. I mean, they were like, it was just this cheesy quid pro quo kind of stuff. And, but they were operating with impunity. And of course they were, because they knew that this is what was going to happen, that it would all get investigated. There would be some small slap on the wrist. Maybe somebody would get shuffled out of a department, but nobody was going to go to jail. Nobody was. And this is the part that's really starting to weigh on me pretty heavily. So let me tell you about actually one of the bright spots that I saw. And it was around a tragic case, but and this is bringing it all the way back down to the individual level. Down in North Carolina, there was this case where a policeman showed up and shot a guy. It happened to be a white policeman and a black person, so they had that element as well. But it was such an egregious misuse of force that the sheriff involved just took one look at the evidence. There was no video or anything, but just took a look at the evidence and just said, "That's it. This guy is like canned. I'm not. This police officer has no rights here. He's being fired. He's not being put on leave without pay or any of that stuff." Right? Just there was an immediate consequence, and that was actually, oddly enough, an encouraging sign to me, because more often than not, what I see is that official parties have figured out that if they just sort of circle the wagons, doing what's right versus what you can sort of get away with, or you protect your interests first and all of that, it feels to me like the very rule of law is being, I don't know that it has much meaning anymore. And I really worry about the corrosive effect of that, because when the rule of law goes away, we like to think laws have real power, but they don't. The big power of laws is that people believe they have power. When people start to disbelieve in the laws, all kinds of stuff happens. That's what's happened on Wall Street. They lost the rule of law. Nobody cares anymore about the rule of law. Not the appearance of it, not the spirit, not even the letter of it.
Right. And yet they pretend as if they do. And the same thing happens at in the Obama administration. The same thing happened in the Bush administration, of course. Dating all the way back, dating back forever, but Nixon was one of the first to proclaim, I think the exact quote is, when the president does it, it's not wrong. And when the president does it, it's not illegal. Huh? What? And that's the way that presidents have acted. That's the way the financial industry has acted. That's the way Wall Street has acted. And it's no wonder, that people are upset. But where do they go? Who do they blame? I got an email from Brand, who emails me every day, articles in Spain. He sends me articles that I have to translate from Spanish or from French, from Europe. And he said the people in Spain are distrust for political parties, all the political parties, in Spain, there's lots of them, is at the lowest level ever. We see the same thing here, and yet people have no idea. They're just resigned. They don't know what to do about it. They don't know what they can do because there's no political party. There's no one over there they can trust. No one they believe is going to fix the system. So they're just resigned to giving up. And a lot of Europe is headed that way, more so than the United States, where we still have this Republicans versus Democrats, where people believe if they're in one party, they believe that their party's actually going to accomplish something. In Europe, they've actually given up, and they realize no matter what they do, nothing good is going to happen. That's what it's come down to in Europe, and we're probably going to see the same thing here, Chris.
And what you're speaking to is this extraordinary vacuum of leadership, of not even leadership, but people just doing what's right rather than what's expedient or what's politically right, to them or what personally enriches them. And so I mentioned, it was a bright spot to me that this sheriff just did what I thought was the right thing. Like there was an egregious use of force, and he just immediately had a consequence for that. And I thought that was right. And I got to be honest, so this is really dangerous territory because this is not religious, and I am not a Catholic, and I am not in any way supporting any sort of religion or anything like that. But I got to tell you, I've been really impressed with the new pope. And what really impresses me is that he's living his values. And I hear that, they have concern now that in the Vatican that he actually sneaks out at night to go find poor people to comfort them, just like he did in Buenos Aires that when he was a cardinal there, that he has this belief that his role as the leader of that organization is to exemplify the core principles of the document that holds the framing for their organization. And that's really rare. And it's but it's a bright light for me because I think when that happens, when people start to live by what's right, and you can have some documents that help frame that for you, that you have something, it gives people the ability to believe in something larger than themselves, and believe not that the Pope is larger than any of us. He's a man, but that by living by principles is a really important thing, not just for my culture, but for any culture, for humans. And I think what we're talking about here is that's in desperately short supply. And so the people of Spain have decided that they're sort of in this anarchy phase where what can you believe in? And when you don't know what you can believe in, that's a corrosive place to be. That's not awesome. And so the question is, who can we believe in and why? And really it's as simple as this. I think either people are walking their talk, they are living by principles that clearly separate right from wrong. They don't need a really legally, beautifully ironclad set of rules to operate in that if they wiggle through, it doesn't count. Right from wrong. You either know it or you don't. I have to submit to you that I think that the nexus of power between Wall Street and Washington is so polluted at this point that I've lost any hope that there's decency left in that arrangement. And I hate to be that cynical, but that's where I've come to because I don't see any accountability for what are clearly violations of both the spirit and the letter of the law.
I'm with you on that. I think we might have one more chance to get it right. After that, all hope is going to be lost. I'm talking about the 2016 election. It'll be interesting to see, who the candidates are, what they stand for, who actually wins the nomination. Does someone like a Rand Paul even have a chance? I happen to think he does. I don't know how big of a chance he has, but he has that chance. Say what you like about Chris Christie, he at least seems to have some sort of principles somewhere. He's not my choice. I would like a Rand Paul. I would certainly like a Ron Paul. But if we get the likes of Hillary Clinton versus another Mitt Romney clone, where are we going with that? And, that's my fear at this point. We'll see what happens. 2016 is a long way off. Many things can happen between now and then with the Fed, with the stock market, with the global economy. So I think what we're going to be discussing about then might be a bit different than what we are now. But these are the battle lines being drawn, and I don't think we have very many more chances, Chris, to get it right.
I agree with that, Mish. And in closing here, my hope is that we have a choice of some sort in 2016, and it's a choice between. I hope one of the candidates has obvious morals that I can believe in, that they have a stance, that they have character, that they have something they believe in, and that fundamentally they believe in something that I can relate to, that says they know right from wrong, they know up from down. Because fundamentally, I think the main machine of U.S. politics creates people who, by the end of that pipeline, are not immoral necessarily, although that's sometimes the case, but amoral. Like they literally don't have any tethering. Like their next thing they believe in most is what the last focus group told them was important. Like they have no moorings. They're just drifting in a sea.
Yes, and actually that's the sense I get about Merkel. Everyone's cheering here, that she's got this grand coalition with the SPD, but, and cheering what a great politician she is. And she is. She's actually a phenomenal politician. She holds her finger up to the air, and whichever way the wind is blowing, that's the way she blows. And on that basis, she keeps getting, reelected. But she's not been good for Europe. I don't think she's been good for Germany. But when you're willing to blow in the wind and say one thing and then reverse course the very next day, like she's done many times over, EU bailouts, over, we're not going to do this. We're not going to give Greece any more money, and then we give Greece more money, over her complete reversal on nuclear energy in Germany, going from for it to against it overnight when public opinion changed. The whole thing is disgusting. All of this politics is disgusting. We're going to see. 2016. We'll have one more chance to get this right. After that, I fear we won't get another chance. With that, Chris, I got to go. Pleasure talking to you, and we'll catch you in a week.
All right, Mish, we'll catch you in a week.